This story is called Come Play With Me by FLYSTORY. Some time ago, a friend of mine and I decided to do the Ouija board for the first time, something we had never dared to do before. We called 2 other friends to come and do it with us, as I had been told that it was more likely something would happen if there were more people. We had a hard time convincing the other 2, but in the end, they agreed to come along. We got everything ready and, feeling a bit nervous, got started. During the session, one of the girls we had called to join us said, "This is nonsense. I'm out of here." We got a little scared and decided to leave it for another time. After a few days, the girl who had left called me. She said that, as she was passing a derelict house near her home on the way back from the local library, a little girl dressed in white had asked to play with her. My friend told her that she couldn't, as she was in a hurry to get home, and immediately the girl began to cry tears of blood. My friend fled, and when she got home, she called me. At first, I thought she was pulling my leg, but something told me that was not the case. I began to think about the day we had done the Ouija board and how abrupt my friend had been when she had got up to leave. I didn't give it much thought and went to bed. The next day, my friend called me because she was going to be home alone, studying, and she was scared. She asked me to keep her company. I took a bus over to hers and we settled down with our books. After a while, we heard a scratching noise behind us. We both looked up and were horrified to find that the girl she had described to me was sitting on my friend's bed, scratching the wall. We ran out of the room, and when we got to the front door, I noticed that my friend was not there, but I was so terrified I couldn't make myself wait for her. Shortly afterwards, the police called my house to tell me that my friend had died of an asthma attack. She had been found on the stairs of her house with a terrified expression on her face. For several months after that, I was in treatment. I am now recovering, but the other day, a note appeared in my mailbox written in a little girl's handwriting that read, "Your friend died because she wouldn't play with me. I have a new doll." I think it's a joke, since our story has become famous in our town, but on the other hand, I'm scared. I wonder, will she come for me? This story is called The Old Woman in My House by Loop555. Quick backstory. Me and my family moved into our old house when I was around 3 to 4 years old. My mum has told me before that when we first moved, I always used to talk about an old woman. I used to tell my mum that she would come out of the wardrobe and sit on my rocking chair and watch me play with my toys. I also used to tell my mum that the old woman told me not to mess around with the chickens and pigs, which was strange because we didn't have any chickens, neither did we live near a farm. I myself don't remember it properly because I was 3 to 4 years old when I said all this. However, there is one encounter that I remember with the old woman I was telling my mum about. This happened when I was 9 years old. I had came back from one of my regular hospital appointments, so it was just me and my mum at home. My dad was at work and my sisters were still at school. I decided to play on my Roblox with my mum's laptop, and she let me take it up to my room as long as I was careful with it. The laptop needed to be charged, so I bent down to plug the charger in, and as I got back up, I saw this old woman through the laptop screen. It was creepy. The woman was staring at me and didn't blink. She looked kinda miserable. Anyway, it took me a minute, but I turned around and no one was there, and when I looked back at the laptop screen, she was gone. I was obviously spooked by that and scared, so I went downstairs and told my mum, but my mum thought I was just imagining things. I decided to stay downstairs and watch the TV until my sisters came back. I 100% was not imagining it. I can see everything and the woman, and I can remember her face and the way she was standing It was 100% real, and I was 100% awake. After I was 12, we moved out, and I still wonder if the old woman is in the house. I never saw her again, and the only thing that was kinda weird after that moment was we would hear knocking around the house on the walls in places that didn't make sense. Apart from that, I've not seen the woman since that incident. Nothing really creepy has ever happened since. I never took much interest in paranormal things, mainly because at the time I was still young. In more recent years, it has started to interest me, and I sometimes wonder if the people who bought the house from us have seen or heard anything weird or out of place. The story is called Was I Almost Jumped? By Cap_Cryote. So, this is something I haven't thought much about since the night it happened, but it requires a little backstory. I had 4 friends at the time, 2 of which were my neighbours and another 2 lived near the middle of our city. The 4 would all hang out together since I had a different schedule, and I would end up joining them in the mid-city area on multiple occasions. The thing is, I didn't have a car, and the distance was about an hour and 40 minutes walk, so I would make this walk later in the evening. I made it to the apartment just fine. We smoked and watched TV, just hanging out like kids do. I can't stay the night places, so I leave to head home around 11 or 12ish, sometimes later. I was a tomboy, and still am, a big MMA enthusiast and a middle finger attitude that comes with having 5 brothers, so the walks home never bothered me, despite occasional creepers. It wasn't weird to me when a small couple approached me. They were both small and super shifty, didn't like them at all on first glance. They walked up and stared at me for a minute, just super awkward, and finally asked if I had the light. I said no, and they started looking me up and down. The woman asked me how I was doing and other weird stuff that was obviously to buy time, while I noticed the guy slowly moving behind me. My mind was set to the opponent, and I decided that I didn't want one of them behind me, so I shifted to face them both at an angle which made him stop. Neither of them ever looked away from me once during this whole meeting, and eventually I'd had enough, and just told them to have a good night, gave them my good old 17-year-old Batman face until they started backing away, and eventually turned around and walked off. It sounds weird and kind of funny now, but I was really scared once I walked away and started putting the pieces together. Never took that route again. The story is called Scary Encounter When I Was a Teenager by AhDunWantIt. This happened probably around 14 years ago when I was 17. I was in university in California, and I used to go to a local Starbucks by my campus in my free time to study, because it was hard for me to focus at home. I remember this older guy used to come in a lot, and just sit alone at a table, always facing me, with one small coffee, and he would just stare. It made me deeply uncomfortable, but I was too young thinking about reporting it, because I didn't think there was anything to report. He was just staring, not approaching me or anything. In fact, I thought some of it was in my head. I began to notice that sometimes he would leave around the same time I did. With this Starbucks, the parking was mostly in the ground level of a free parking structure that was around the corner from the shop. It was usually super easy to get a spot right in the front of it, so you could actually see your car from the street and the structure. I usually parked there, and I never felt particularly unsafe, except when I would realize he was following me out. I began to note what his car looked like and where he would park. It would usually be a little away from me, and I would wait for him to leave before I went anywhere, because I didn't want him following me. One afternoon, though, I was heading to my car, and I noticed that he had parked right next to me. The The passenger side of the car was by my driver's side, and it was very close. I didn't see him, but I remember just having the most awful feeling in the pit of my stomach when I realized he had parked so close. I rushed to get in my car, and it was at that moment that I shut the door that I realized he was following me and had approached the driver's side of my vehicle. He had gotten as far as the door when I quickly locked it, and thankfully I did it fast enough, because he tried to open my door a second later. I immediately backed out of the spot and flooded out of the structure. I got caught at a red light outside the structure though, which gave this guy enough time to catch up to me in his car. I honestly didn't know why I didn't call the cops at this moment. I remember trying to rationalize what was going on in my head and thinking maybe I was making a big deal out of nothing, even though the man had literally just tried to open my car door. I know it's stupid, but I was 17. If I were me now, a 31-year-old, you bet I would have driven straight to the nearest police station. Thankfully though, I was aware enough that I needed to lose him before I went home, so I turned into a series of residential streets to see if he would follow. He did. I just sped up and made a bunch of random turns until I was sure I lost him. Then I drove home and never went back to that Starbucks again. The story is called Target Creep. It was Christmas time, and I remember that I had broken my ankle prior to this, so I was wearing my cast now. The doctors gave me the shoe thing so I could walk without my crutches, and my cast was bright pink. Anyways, my parents and I were going Christmas shopping at a Target, but we ended up literally buying some socks and shampoo, not much. We didn't even get any gifts, so it was a waste of time. So we paid and we were leaving when I saw this white male just staring at our car. Now, we had parked in a semi-empty area. There were only a couple of cars. Like, he wasn't looking inside and snooping around the car, he was just standing straight, staring at the right side of the car. Now at this time, we had this beige-brown coloured Ford Explorer. It was a 2002, so I'm so confused, and we didn't have anything inside at all, so I was even more creeped out. Now I wanted to go back and get a security guard, but my dad just said that it was fine and he'll tell him to move, and told me to get in the left side. I usually sit on the right side, so yeah. Now we got there, and this dude did not move even when my dad told him to move. He just stood and stared inside. My mum just said to get in the car quickly, and we did. We got in, and the man stood there and kept staring inside. I felt his gaze on me, because again, he was staring at the right side behind the driver's seat. So since I got in, he was staring at me. But I didn't look, I just looked ahead of me. And at this point, I was pretty scared that my dad was going to hit him since he was pretty close to the car. So my dad backs up and is turning to go out the parking lot when we see the guy move and open the left side of the car. At that point, I screamed and my dad just sped off, and when he did, the door closed because he turned, and my heart was pounding. As we sped off, we saw him just standing there, then starting to move to the entrance of the Target. Now, I literally was having so many thoughts in my head, like, OMG, what if he put a good tracker or something on the car? Because we didn't know how long he had been just standing there. But my parents were like, no, I don't think so, he was probably just some creep. That night, I prayed. I was like, Lord, please, don't let him track us and stuff like that. I was terrified. Besides being scared and creeped out, we were fine. The next day, my parents had work, and they'd usually take me since it was a Sunday. Well, to get there, we had to pass the same Target, and when we did, we saw the empty parking lot with the same blonde, long-haired white guy. When I say my heart stopped, I was terrified. Even my parents were shocked. And he was just there, staring as we drove by. After that, We never saw him again. Now, this may have been 6 years ago, but this was so scary and creepy that I never wanted to meet that guy again.